if you keep up at all with what's going on in communications, and particularly in journalism, I think you have seen some of the problems that journalists, mass communications people generally have to deal with day after day. The newspaper columnist, for example, who takes material from somebody else's column because it looks so good, puts it into his own column, and gives no attribution to the original source. There's the magazine writer. Have any of you seen Shattered Glass? You've seen Shattered Glass. Shattered Glass is the story of
What's that guy's name?
Stephen Glass.
Stephen Glass. He was not the New York. I'm thinking of the New York Times guy. But this was the Washington D.C.
Yeah, he worked for the New Republic.
Republic. Yes.
Yeah, and simply made up stories. He made up sources. He made up quotes that he put in their mouths, and he made up situations in which they were involved. He'd be a wonderful novelist, but he was passing this stuff off as truth and not fiction. The movie, by the way, is really very good, and I think you might even rent it up there at Blockbuster. Shattered Glass is the name. Or you read the story of the sports reporter who gets on to the notion that a prominent athlete has AIDS and goes to the athlete and checks with the athlete, and the athlete says yes, but what's the point? Please don't print that. And next week he opens USA Today, and there's the story of his fight with AIDS. He got it from a blood transfusion. He still had AIDS. A reporter promises a source. I won't tell your name. The source calls up and says, look, I've got some wonderful news here. I've got some stuff that I've just got to get off my chest. It's really got legs, as they say in Washington. But you've got to promise me that you're not going to use my name. And the guy said, okay, I promise. And the next thing you know, the prosecutor is knocking on the door, saying, give me the name, or you go to jail. What is the person to do in that situation? Or a television reporter is covering City Hall, and she meets a politician. And they kind of make sparks go between the two of them if she's interviewing him. And the first thing you know, they are dating. And she's still covering City Hall. And she's still covering him. Perhaps they even get married. What happens then? Well, all those are examples of the kinds of ethical problems, I think the major sorts of ethical problems that journalists face and I think communicators generally face in their day-to-day work. Questions about truth, questions about privacy of individuals, questions about confidentiality, maintaining confidentiality of their sources, and conflicts of interest. The question is, how do we determine what we ought to do when we come up against those kinds of ethical problems? What are our considerations going to be? Well, first of all, in talking about ethics, what are we talking about? Values? What's ethics? Yes, please. Cambridge. What?
Morals?
Morals? What does that mean?
What you believe in?
All right, what's right, what you believe in, but ethics is something a little extra special. What is it?
What a group believes in?
More than that. What is it? Truth. Truth. What is truth?
A system that
determines between right and wrong?
Right and wrong in respect to what?
People dealing with each other?
People dealing with each other, how we get along. How ought I to be to you? Or you? What should our relationship be? So we're always looking for what ought to be between individuals and the broader society when we're talking about something like professional. We're talking about something like professional ethics. And what in this relationship between people are we really after? What are we really, well, let me put it this way. How do you want to be treated? Alex, tell me, how do you want to be treated?
Pretty well.
Okay, good. Well, we'll treat you well tonight. I won't pick on, since he's the only one, I know his name, I can pick on.
How do I want to be treated as a professional,
As a person?
right?
What kind of a person are you?
Like a good one.
Good. Okay, good. I got that settled. Good or bad? What kind of a person are you?
A human being. No, it's
Human. What is a human being?
capable of higher thought
And
processes.
what do you, in that higher thought, what do you do when you're thinking?
Make decisions.
Decisions. What is making decisions? The mark of the autonomous individual. I can make decisions. But if you're going to make the right decisions, what do you expect from me?
That you'll do the same.
What?
That you'll do the same.
That I will
Do the same.
what?
Respect.
Respect you. What is respect in this instance for you?
Appreciating and live, or I don't know.
Yeah, you do. Come on, you got it. You got it.
Well, I mean, appreciating and making decisions that go, or that don't affect negatively whatever that person's decision is.
And positively?
I guess it would have been realizing the value of someone else's own standards and beliefs and all that business.
You want me to treat you as an end, right? You ever had a roommate comes back to the dormitory and says, oh, gosh, that guy just wants to use me. He's just using me. She's using me. What do you want? What do you want from that guy? You don't want him to use you, do you? No. What do you want?
Respect.
Respect. You are an end. You aren't a means. You want him to promote you. When you find the guy that's going to do that, that's the one you're going to marry, right? Well, in most of our dealings with each other on the personal level and on the professional level, that's what we want. We want to be treated as ends rather than means, and it's up to the professional, whether it is the doctor. Ever go to one of these guys? You go to a doctor? Maybe some of you have fathers or mothers who are doctors. I go sometimes and damn quack. Damn quack only wants is my money. Didn't fix my problem. Right? No. I'm not an end to his wealth, a means to his wealth. I am an end, and I want to be treated as an end. And I expect when I go to a doctor that I am going to be treated as an end. And I expect when I pick up my morning newspaper or turn on my TV set, I'm going to be treated as an end by the reporters, by the people who are doing the advertising, by the public relations people who do the feeding to journalists. And the problems in ethics come in when they treat us as means rather than ends. We in taking on, or in taking on the job of a journalist, or an advertising person, or public relations person, what we want to do is to show concern for other people, respect for other people, and we want to try as best we possibly can to avoid harm in conflicting situations. Because the journalist has to write bad things about people. We write about what's not normal. A story in Sunday's paper, maybe some of you saw it, about Kimberly Williamson Butler, this election clerk of court who was responsible for the elections. And according to the paper, she really goofed. Election machines didn't get to the polling places on time. All kinds of people were unable to vote. You have to write about that. She's a public official. At the same time, you want to try to minimize the harm. You know that harm is going to come to the person. Well, how can we do that? Well, we've got various kinds of obligations. The same kind as journalists or as communications people. The same kinds of obligations that anybody in society has. What we call general obligations to one another. And then we have particularistic obligations which flow from our being journalists, that are particular to our particular profession. And I would say that if we meet those, if we are competent in our fields, competent journalist or competent doctor or competent record producer, we will be a virtuous journalist or doctor or record producer. Because we will be doing what we ought to do. What are our major concerns in communication? Truth, privacy, confidentiality, and conflict of interest, as I said. Those, I think, are the major ones. There are others. But we have only about an hour here. If we had a full semester, we would go into all of them. Why truth? Why do we want truth? Why do you want that? Why do you want Dan Rather to look out at you every night from his perch in New York and tell you the truth?
So you have the correct information, so you're not believing things that aren't true.
Why? Why do you want the correct information?
I don't know, why would you want the wrong information?
Well, no, that's not the question. The question is why do you want the right information?
That way you can feel safe making decisions and judgments about things.
Yeah, so you can confident. You are an autonomous human being. And it doesn't make any difference whether he's telling you, that guy on TV, or the person who's written the newspaper story, or the person who's written the magazine story. It doesn't make any difference whether he's giving you information about voting that's going to help you. And after all, that's what journalism is. It's useful material, useful information. It doesn't make any difference whether he's telling you about information that you're going to use when you make up your mind about whom to vote for in the upcoming election. Or the advertiser, if you're going out to buy a pair of shoes, you want the straight talk about those shoes, or whether to carry your umbrella. Bob Breck last night told me I wouldn't need my umbrella until this afternoon. I took the streetcar downtown today. I had to come back, and it rained in the morning. I made the wrong decision because Bob Breck was not honest with me. I got wet too. I didn't melt though.
Do you think it's ethical for newspapers or any kind of media form to have a slant, a political slant, like I guess like the New York Times does, and pretty much
Fox News.
Fox a lot of major media.
Fox is fair and balanced. They tell you so. We're going to talk about that. I'm going to talk about that in just a minute. Yeah, it helps us make decisions when they're truthful. They're showing respect for us as persons, right? Also, what about, you and this guy friends? You're not. In order to become friends, what would you say that, what role does trust play in this relationship?
Yeah, I think you'd have to have shared experiences where you can trust one another.
All right. Is trust necessary to a friendship? You've got to have trust. You have to trust other people. Why? Because when that person that trusts you tells you the truth, he's demonstrating what?
You can trust them.
Demonstrating that you can trust him. And that, what?
Respect.
Respect.
Mutual.
He respects you. Sure. Truth demonstrates a respect for persons, and we see this respect for persons everywhere. What was the first thing? You learn that very, very, very early. The whole Judeo-Christian ethic is built upon that notion. And then finally, what's the rap on President Bush about the Iran situation? Whether you're Republican or Democrat, what is it that the critics are saying? Where did Bush fall down, say the critics?
That he's going to get us all blown up, basically.
Yeah, what was Saddam Hussein doing? He was creating weapons. He had weapons of mass destruction. We, on that basis, did what? To war. And then, as it turns out, there weren't any of those weapons of mass destruction. The weapons of mass imagination. What happened? What happened? Public opinion was formed on the basis of an untruth, apparently, say the critics. Bush says, well, it doesn't make any difference. Saddam Hussein is gone. Well, it does make a difference. It does make a difference. The whole democratic process relies upon public officials telling us the truth. That's why we get so upset. That's why Richard Nixon left office. Why did he leave office? Because the burglars broke into the Watergate apartment? Why?
You lied about it.
He lied about it. What was Bill Clinton in such difficulty about? The women? Lied about it. What did you learn from this high? Mother and father were saying, I don't care what you do, just tell me the truth. Just tell me the truth. And then you'll find out someday. Kids all you'll all lie to your parents. You'll find out that they lied to you. You're terribly hurt. It takes a great leap to remember back. And you stood there and looked straight in your mother's eye or your father's eye and said, no, I didn't go there. I didn't do that. I didn't go out. But we need that in personal relationships, and we need it in the democratic process as well. It's crucial, and that's where journalism, the importance, I think really the serious importance of journalism, truth in journalism lies in its importance in the democratic process. It's essential. The democracy depends upon informed people. Thomas Jefferson said one time, if I could choose whether to have government without newspapers or newspapers without a government, I should not hesitate a moment to prefer the latter. Information is what's crucial. The government is less important. Journalistic truth is, first of all, accurate. We're talking about truth. We want accuracy. Joseph Pulitzer, the great 19th century publisher, he also helped to bring us yellow journalism. But he had in his newsroom signs on all the walls in the newsroom. Accuracy, accuracy, accuracy. Adlai Stevenson said one time, accuracy is to a newspaper as virtue is to a woman. Separate. Journalistic truth also helps to promote, or should help to promote, our understanding of the world and what's going on. And journalists are criticizing themselves pretty heavily these days for really not giving us a great deal of understanding about what we have been through, what we're going through. And I think they're going to have, we go through these periods frequently, but we're worried about this promoting balance. It demands that journalists themselves understand the story, rather than just standing out there and having somebody lick your ice cream cone. Pass it on to the next person to lick the ice cream cone. And then, what was your question about? The
It
two
was
words
kind of vague.
that Geraldo invented?
Political slant.
Fair and balanced. Fox News, fair and balanced. What does fair and balanced mean? What is fairness? What is fairness?
Impartiality.
Partiality? What do we... You used a term, I think, when you were talking about the New York Times.
Forgot exactly what I said.
What?
Slant bias?
Bias, yeah, bias. We're concerned about bias. Well, frequently, what we have found is that bias is in the eye of the beholder, many times. Although, I would say maybe in much of the time it is. I've got a colleague whose wife was a delegate to the Republican National Convention. He came back and he was just stomping the halls of the communications area about the New York Times. Oh, you should have seen it when we were there. Oh, these headlines. Rah, rah, rah. Practically a very mild-mannered guy. He was practically foaming at the mouth about the New York Times being biased against the Republicans. I didn't notice that. I read the same paper. Of course, I wasn't in New York at the time, but it didn't seem that way to me. But there are people out there who are always looking to see, is it tilting one way or the other? Journalists really do try to balance what they're doing, to not be biased, inclining to one side or the other. Particularly in a period now where we don't have as many news organizations as we once had. It's also the idea of recognizing views that promote understanding. Now, I like to watch the News Hour with Jim Lehrer at 7 o'clock at night on NPR. Now, it's not one of the most exciting television programs. Maybe why I fall asleep after dinner so often. But what do they do? You obviously, you watch it?
I had to
You're
watch
from
it.
Milwaukee, you watch it on what is that, WUW? No. Channel 12 in Milwaukee?
Yeah, ABC, yeah. I had, for high school government class, we had...
Where'd you go to high school?
Whitefish Bay.
Okay.
And why?
I just want to know.
And we had to watch
Inquiring minds.
an episode of it.
Of what? The News Hour.
with Jim Lee.
And what do they do with the News Hour? Anybody else ever watch it?
It's been
If
a
you
while.
like the News Hour, you will love C-SPAN.
I think it's not just Jim Lear. I think he has other people on the show,
Sure.
and they have a discussion.
Yeah, and what do they do? What about the guests? What kind of guests do they do? Do you remember?
Aren't they reporters usually? Or
Well,
different journalists? Or
Sometimes, but also,
Congress people?
what?
Congress people?
Sometimes they get congressmen.
Celebrities.
What?
Celebrities.
Well, rarely celebrities. They tend to get people who are experts. Although they try to get them from a range of areas so that you will get people who disagree with one another. And they will ask questions to kind of pull out the disagreement, looking for the points, the common points, and then also for the points of disagreement. And it's really very, very well done. On the other hand, has anybody ever watched the McLaughlin Report? John McLaughlin? They're all shouting and screaming at each other, right? And half the time you can't even understand what it is they're saying. Well, I think that's the difference. What journalists attempt to do is to provide this balance, the going for the views that help to promote understanding. What about truth in advertising and public relations? They aren't held to quite the same standard. We know that advertisers and public relations people are advocates. We know that they're going to slant the truth in their direction. But still, we want them to be honest with us. We recognize that they're going to tell us all the good points of that 2005 lemon that's going to be coming off the assembly line in Detroit and going onto our TV screens in the fall. But we accept that. We know that car isn't that good. But we grant them a little leeway along the way, as long as they don't just flat out lie to us. They still have that obligation. What about privacy? What does privacy mean? Privacy. You think about yourself this way. Are you a private person? Are you? Are there things you don't want people to know about you? Tell me why. just between the two of us.
That's violating my privacy.
Yeah. Why? What is it? Somebody's after you to get down your deep, dark secrets. Somebody is stalking you. Somebody is taking your picture all the time. Somebody's listening to your telephone calls. Somebody's going to the library to check out and find out what terrible books you've been reading. Somebody goes onto the internet and gets all the places, all those websites that you've been going to. We just got one of those secrets. What do we call it? What do you say to those people? What would you say to somebody like that who's doing all that stuff? Yeah, they're invading. Well, what would you say to them?
Stop.
Stop. Leave me alone, right? Privacy, the basic definition would be the right to be let alone. And one of the great problems with journalism frequently is that we do not honor that right to be let alone. Why privacy? Why privacy? Why do you want to safeguard your privacy? You don't care.
So you can choose what's public and what's not public.
You can choose. You can choose. You make a choice. You are what kind of an individual?
Autonomous.
An autonomous individual. You want to be an autonomous individual. People start snooping. They start going through your garbage. They're finding out what you're eating, what you're reading, what you're thinking. You have lost a degree of autonomy. You want to have control. We see a lot of movies about that, where people sort of lose control because people find out so much about them. You want to be protected. Alex, sitting there in the library over in the corner of that computer room, tapping away on that computer with a big smile on his face. He doesn't want you to know all those sites he's going to. Why? because that would open him up to scorn and ridicule. Would it not? Little did we know. Alex wants his privacy so that he can control his reputation. What's my reputation? What is more valuable to you than your reputation? How you are viewed out there among everyone else in the world. And this is one of the concerns that we have as individuals, and the concern that we have as journalists. We want to keep others at a distance, our personal space. Leave me alone. Get away from me. Give me some space. And that's not just physical, but it's intellectual as well. And privacy is also, or should be, a shield against government intrusion on us. One of the great debates, one of the many debates in this presidential election is over how far should we go, if at all, in amending the Patriot Act. So people can't just walk into a doctor's office and demand to see your records, or walk into the library and want to know what books you've been taking on. That's its own. They're invading my privacy. And we are concerned about that. What kinds? Yes, sir.
It's personal respect that the general public should have for you.
Yes. Yeah. General, personal respect. That's what we want. We want that respect as persons again. It all boils down. It all boils down to that. Exactly. And where could the journalist go wrong in intruding on someone's privacy? Ask Arthur Ashe. Remember Arthur Ashe, great tennis player? Was ill, had a blood transfusion, contracted the AIDS virus in his blood transfusion. Had a wonderful reputation, trying to protect his privacy, largely for the sake of his family. And then the reporter, the sports reporter for USA Today found out and splashed it across the pages of USA Today. Anybody with a contagious disease is concerned about protecting privacy. President Ford, some years ago, was going through a line, shaking hands with people, and a young woman pulled out a pistol and fired it. And there was a guy standing next to her who grabbed the pistol and saved Ford's life. Well, in trying to find out who this guy was, reporters found out that he was homosexual. And next thing you know, that's in the stories. It had nothing to do with the story. Ought they have done that? Doesn't that he had to surrender? He lost a great deal of control over himself when that occurred. People who are accused of sex crimes. Kobe Bryant. Who are the victims of Kobe Bryant? The victims of alleged rapists. Protect their privacy. And there's a great question. If you let Kobe Bryant's name out, why not let out the name of his accuser? Shouldn't that be public as well? And journalists have to balance that, have to deal with that kind of thing. What about using children as sources? What about using secret cameras to find out what people are doing? Or tape recorders? Well, police investigators can use them, but should journalists? Is that not an invasion of privacy when we use those? And what about people with accidents, personal tragedies? One of the worst things journalists will tell you, many journalists will, some doesn't bother them at all. Worst thing you have to do is to go out to the home of somebody who's had a loved one killed and knock on the door and ask for information. how far should you go? And when you are talking to the mother who has just lost a 19-year-old son who's been killed in a car bombing in Beirut, and she starts to cry, and you've got this camera there, do you just hold that camera on her face while she falls apart? Men, just hold it on her. But then when you get to the editing suite, to specifically leave in all that, we're concerned about how we do. Is that not an invasion of the person's privacy in some way or other? How do we struggle through that? How do we struggle through that? How do we struggle through those kinds of questions? First one, respect for persons. You look at respect. But also, how do you balance? How do you balance the public's need to know about some things with individuals' privacy? What we talk about is social utility. Do we really need to know that Arthur Ashe has AIDS? Do we really need to see that mother falling apart in front of our eyes? How do you balance those? Well, how do the tabloids, how do the supermarket tabloids balance that? Is there fairness and balance there? But most reputable news organizations do try to balance those two. And we're concerned with...
Oh, yeah, I kind of did. Trying to figure out, so many people are concerned with, privacy, but they really want to see others' human weaknesses, and it just kind of counteracts their need for their privacy and respect. It seems to me, at least. I mean, there's a reason those tabloids are so popular. There's a reason Fox News is the highest-rated cable network. Things like that.
Well, I think part of it is there's a streak of the voyeur in all of this. You ever been on the freeway when there's been an accident? Slow down. Everybody drives past, and here's one guy, he's driving like this, and the guy in back of him is saying, "Get moving." And then he gets up there to that point, he looks himself. What are they looking for? What are you looking for? I just don't want to happen. Is there anybody dead? Man, you look at almost any fires, we're looking at tragedy. We go for that kind of stuff. And we like to see it in print too. But just because we want it, does that mean we should have it? Do we want to see those dead bodies? Yes.
There's a TV show on late, I don't know exactly what time it is, but it's called Cheaters. And I've watched it. Cheaters.
Cheating?
Cheaters.
Cheaters.
Yeah, and the premise of the show is they take people, two people that are in a relationship, and if one of them suspects that their partner is cheating, they hire a private investigator to follow this person around with video cameras and everything, and bugs on the phones and everything, to find out if they are in fact cheating. And then at the end, they confront them, and people are shown on camera and everything like that. And that's the ultimate invasion of privacy. So,
Privacy. And also what? Lack of trust.
yeah.
Are you going to marry one of those guys? You're going to send those private detectives after you?
But people sell themselves out that way. I mean, I'm sure those people are pretty well compensated. People go on things like the People's Court or Judge Judy. Those people are, putting all their dirty laundry out for everyone to see, but they're getting compensated for it.
Well, that's true. What do we call that?
Selling out.
Selling out. Yeah. Prostitution. Whores, aren't they? And aren't the people who produce those things, in a way, they're pimps? They're selling those people to the public. But that's my view. Maybe you don't believe it, you don't agree with that. But you ask yourself, what is the useful purpose? Why otherwise would they be doing this?
They're doing it because there's a demand for it. I don't know why, but people just like this stuff.
Yeah. But what we're talking about, or what I'm talking about, is Not just what we do, not what is being done, but that magic word for anybody who is caught in an ethical knot. Ought. What ought I to do? Do I just say, oh, yeah, everybody else does it? Everybody else does it. What'd your mother tell you about that?
Everyone else jumped off a cliff.
Yeah. Everybody else jumps off. Here we go. Many times. What about minimizing harm? That also is one of those touchstones that journalists use. How do you minimize harm and still speak to the public that needs to have the information? Find somebody there who's done something terrible. The story ought to be reported, but how much of it do you report?
What people need to know.
What people need to know. You genuinely do try. If you're the ethical journalist, you try to minimize harm. What about advertising? You think advertising can be an invasion of privacy? Have you ever sat on the couch watching a television show with a boy or a male, and you see some advertising on there that just makes you want to crawl under the couch? Do you want to see that? Particularly in that setting?
Probably not.
What would you call that?
I don't know. I wouldn't say that was harmful. More so disturbing. But I don't know. I think maybe advertising can be harmful in the respect that it leads you to believe a certain thing. Maybe not the reaction that you get like at that moment, but if it leads you to think a certain way, advertising doesn't necessarily take social responsibility. It's just there to sell you something.
There are problems with it, yeah. It's there to sell you something, but at the same time that it's selling you things. What is this? There is a Cialis. Are you sitting there watching? You have.
What is that?
It's like Viagra. It's a form of Viagra.
Because I get in my junk mail, I don't watch TV. So my junk mail, I get buy Cialis, I don't know what it is.
Well, that's what it is.
It's like on TV. So.
It's like apparently a potency enhancing drug. But do you think you ever watched those things with? I was sitting there one day watching that with my mother-in-law, and she was embarrassed, and I was embarrassed.
It's offensive.
It is offensive. What about all these females you get wanting to enhance all your body parts and something you don't have? Right? Do you get those emails? Yeah. It's intrusive, isn't it? It's a kind of an invasion of privacy.
But if it's on TV, then it's not as, with email, getting junk email is sort of a different issue because you get junk email without asking for it. When you're turning on the TV, you're allowing yourself the possibility of seeing that. You're taking the risk of seeing something like that.
Maybe
it's the same when you sign up
because-
for an email address.
Because we've been subjected to it so much, we
Because
accept it.
desensitized.
But much of it is, you will find, I've got 3 daughters, and we've been watching programs that are, when they were younger, harmless programs, and all of a sudden there's something on them that just, I squirm, and I'm sure that they're squirming inside too. Television can be intrusive, and in being intrusive, it can invade one's privacy. Same way with these, or similar to what happens with the internet and the web. Every time you go to a website, what do? What does the website do?
Pop-ups.
What?
Pop-ups.
You get those pop-ups, those are intrusive. But you also, takes, cookies? And then somebody else comes along and gets that information. You get stuff from credit card companies and other people trying to sell you things, and it's fairly obvious that the label on the envelope matches the label you get material from Loyola with. You ever get those? The credit card offers, and yeah. How did they get that stuff, you suppose?
Loyola sold it to them.
Loyola sold it to them. That's wrong. Is that not an invasion of your privacy for somebody to take your name and sell it to a company? I've got that. And this mining of databases is also becoming more and more intrusion. Confidentiality. And we have a major case of confidentiality or confidentiality program, a problem in which someone from the White House, President's staff, Vice President's staff apparently, called 4 or 5 reporters and said, the wife of a man who went to Niger and said that there was no uranium being produced there for Iraq. We came back and reported on it. That guy's wife is an agent for the CIA, and her name is Victoria Plain. And one of these journalists, to whom he called, sat down and wrote a column and used the woman's name, effectively killing her as a CIA agent, not physically, but she can't work anymore as an agent. A special prosecutor is out there looking at that. The journalists are going before the special prosecutor, and they're being asked to reveal the name. I'm sorry, I can't tell you the name. I promised that I would not. If somebody promises you that they are not going to tell the secret that you have told them, what do you expect? You expect them to keep the promise?
It's like a contract.
Well, what do you do when the special prosecutor comes? Well, this is a problem that people are dealing with. Do I tell or do I not? If you're interested, Saturday in the Times-Picayune, copies of in the library. It's a wonderful column by William Safire, a conservative columnist in the New York Times, and writing about this situation.
In situations like that, when they demand to know a name, are the journalists obligated to tell them, or can they plead the Fifth Amendment saying, I have a verbal contract with this person?
Well,
The Fifth Amendment makes sure someone doesn't protect other people.
No, but, I mean, that just seems unjust to have to...
it does seem unjust, yeah. But, you see, here's where your conflict as an individual and a journalist come into play at the same time. As an individual, I have an obligation to answer questions of a grand jury, to help law enforcement as best I can. As a journalist who's made a promise, I have a responsibility to advance the profession. And this is one of the things that journalists are concerned about when the prosecutors come calling. I've made a promise, a professional promise. And what happens if I break that promise? Who's going to trust you again if you do that?
Well,
Even in Whitefish Bay.
isn't the journalist also taking the risk that that person's going to rat somebody else out? Or, reveal somebody else who's in some official that they're not supposed to reveal, or some agent?
I'm not sure I follow you. Usually it's, somebody always, somebody provides you with the information with a full expectation that it's going to, he wants something changed, he wants something done.
Mm-hmm.
And if his name gets out, he's toast, wherever he works, probably.
Mm-hmm.
You make an express promise to somebody. Sure, I promise you, I will not tell. Or, once you two guys get to be very good friends, and he tells you something, do you tell that? And he says it's kind of a secret. He doesn't ask you to promise not to tell him, but he just tells you. Do you tell somebody?
Depends on the kind of person you are.
Well, I know that. I'm asking about you. I expect you to be a fine, upstanding, ethical person. No?
Not unless it's something serious like life-threatening or...
Life-threatening. But, by and large, we have a loyalty to our friends, don't we? And we expect that somebody, if somebody, you two don't think you do have a loyalty to your friends? Huh? Cutthroats, okay. But we have this kind of a situation. We have a loyalty. All these books that come out, after a presidency is up and the waiter is telling what went on in the back room. Right? They're violating confidentiality to a great extent. They're violating loyalty. There's not necessarily an express promise. In some instances there is. They have to sign an oath. But in others, it's simply a matter of breaking loyalty. And then there are some confidential relationships that are established by law. The priest and the penitent, the doctor and patient, the lawyer and client, the journalist and the source. Law doesn't recognize it, unfortunately. So you go over here and tell Father Loyola. You can tell him anything. And most people do. He's not going to tell anybody. And the grand jury is going to come and say, what about these two cutthroats up here in the back? And he's going to say, I can't tell you under the seal of confession. We have a respect, once more, for human autonomy, why we do not break promises. We also keep promises because keeping promises establishes trust. We keep promises because we want to prevent harm. And it's useful. It's socially useful. We've got to have those kinds of bonds. For journalists, the relationship of confidentiality is based on the general obligation to honor promises and this particularistic obligation to promote the field. But we do have some problems. Confidentiality sometimes denies the public the right to know who said it. I'd like to know who those sources are who say. They tell us on TV, sources say, blah, blah, blah. Well, who are they? Is it a guy on the next bar stool that you saw just before you went back to the station after dinner? Or is it somebody who is really important? The Dan Rather story about President Bush and his National Guard duty. We finally found out who the source was. Once we knew who the source was, he was pretty much discredited. The same way with the Swift boat vest. When we finally got to who the source was for those advertisements, he was a guy who was just hated Democrats, and for some reason he's hated Kerry for years and years and years. He's got a bone to pick. So that's a problem when you offer confidentiality. Anonymous sources can use the media to attack other people too. And we try not to do that. You don't want to harm others unnecessarily. Confidentiality also tends to shield reporters sometimes from this general obligation that they have. And then we run into this conflict where the people seeking disclosure go up against the people who are claiming confidentiality. What do? The journalist has to sit down and say to himself, what is best in the public interest? What ought I do to best serve the greatest number? My time is close.
Oh, I think we can spend a little bit on that.
I have one more point that I would like to get at, and this is this matter of conflict of interest, because journalists frequently have conflicts of interest. The clash of what? We talk about conflict of interest. Clashing
Personal and professional interests.
Yeah, personal and professional obligations, of one sort or another. Loyalties. And they take a great variety of form, great varieties. When I was a young newsman working in Chicago, practically every night in the autumn, we could go someplace and eat free because these companies were putting on receptions for journalists, fully expecting that the journalists would be their friends. They would woo us with eating and drinking. It was wonderful. Ought we have done that? Well, there's a lot of question about that. And many journalistic codes today forbid the taking of freebies. If I go to cover a Saints game and they give me, what, a Saints hat. Well, not much there. It's not very valuable. But I've taken it. Where'd you get that Saints hat? Oh, the Saints gave it to me. Well, what do you think? Are those stories about the Saints fair and balanced? Oh, Jim Mora takes me out to dinner. Or Jim Mora, how soon we forget. Jim Haslett takes me out to dinner. Well, am I going to sit down and write in my story that he's one of the most inept coaches in the NFL? I saw a friend from St. Louis the other day. We were talking about that game, the the Rams Saints game. And he said, that Vermeil is the stupidest coach in the NFL. He said, they're winning the game, and then he has the guy kick that little squib down the field so that it sets up the Saints for the field goal. Stupid. He said, the only coach that's stupider is Jim Haslett. This from a St. Louis guy. Who knows? I trust him. He knows. Anyway, that doesn't have anything to do with this. Participation in political activities. I have a television program, normally on Friday nights on public television. My wife has very strong feelings about political candidates. She has bumper stickers on her car supporting candidates, which I have to drive sometimes. She keeps after me to put them on. No, reluctant. Certainly wouldn't do it for a local candidate, a state or local candidate. National, maybe. She wants to put a sign in the front yard. She wants to put signs for all these people in the front yard. I wouldn't want that. Why? It's a conflict of interest. And even if I can say, well, I can be perfectly unbiased, perfectly fair, perfectly balanced on the air, it still gives the appearance. It gives the appearance of conflict. And we must be journalists, the purists, the pure journalists would say, purer than Caesar's wife. There's the matter of secondary employment. There are people in this town who've worked for the press and written speeches for political candidates. Would you trust that person's writing? Or even service sometimes in community organizations. Somebody is working for, even a volunteer for the YMCA, or YWCA, even on the board of Loyola University. These people have to cover the university. Does this participation color their writing? Or would people think that it might color their writing? Most of the media organizations have codes of ethics in which they forbid these kinds of things. But there are also problems with business on a higher level. Who owns the ABC television network? Disney. Not at all a Mickey Mouse operation. And what happens with Disney on ABC? ABC covers Disney movies. And there are all kinds of other interlocking business relationships that have an effect frequently.